Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad that you could be a part of today's career panel. The goal is really just to help you guys learn a little bit more about sports professionals and business professionals here in the Central Florida area. You're in for a treat. You're joined by Jean Martin and Carlyn Tribble, who are great friends of mine and also incredible business leaders in the Central Florida area. I'm going to start with Carlyn and allow you to introduce yourself, tell us where you're working and what you're doing in your day-to-day responsibilities.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Carlyn Tribble. I'm the Director of Events for Florida Citrus Sports. So we're a member-based organization. So a lot of the things that I handle are our member events. And then also for the bowl games, I manage all of our ancillary team events and any hospitality fan-facing events as well.
Great. Thank you, Carlyn. And Jean, the floor is yours.
Yes, first I want to thank Florida Citrus Sports for putting this on and allowing us to share our stories. Again, my name is Jean Martin, Senior Manager of Social Responsibility with the Orlando Magic. I'm responsible for all of the Magic's community relations programs, cause marketing initiatives, and NBA Cares initiatives as well.
That's great. And by way of introduction, I'm Ashley Turner. I'm the Director of External Affairs and Partnerships at UCF's Sports Business Management Master's Program. I have worked with both Carlyn and Jean in different varieties, so I'll be interjecting a little bit of my story and journey as well. I'd like to start, Jean, with you. Social responsibility is a little bit of a buzzword now. It's changed. I know from being close with you and working with you a long time at the Magic that roles and responsibility has evolved. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got to your current role?
Sure. So for those of you that are not too familiar with social responsibility, it's a fancy way of saying community relations, or in other words, an organization's commitment to the welfare of the community in which it operates. So a little bit of how I got there and a little bit about my career path. I've been involved in sports my entire life, been a student athlete, was a student athlete at the University of Florida. Had the opportunity to serve as an intern within the operations department with the University Athletic Association. Pursued grad school at the University of Florida as well, specifically studying sport management. Found out about careers in sports very early on while attending the University of Florida, and then set myself up for an internship with the Orlando Magic in ticket sales. So definitely have jumped around a lot from my ticket sales experience. Actually had the opportunity to work at UCF as well in their ticket sales department and sports marketing department, supporting all of UCF athletic sports. After about a year and some change, transitioned over back to the Orlando Magic, working for their youth foundation as a coordinator. But at that point in time, I had the exposure to a lot of the community relations programs and responsibilities. And that's something that really intrigued me, the ability to work very closely internally with the Orlando Magic organization, as well as externally with colleagues and counterparts in the community. And that's something that I wanted to be a part of and have actually been working in that capacity for the last 7 years now.
That's great. I mean, we're going to come back to how the world has evolved and changed and how that's impacted your role. So be marinating on what that looks like. And you work more in the event space, but as we know, sports is an event. But talk to us a little bit about your journey, how you've gotten to the role that you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of like Jean, sports has always been in my life. I grew up watching sports. My father's worked in sports his whole life. And so it was kind of ingrained in me that sports was always going to be something that I was going to do. I don't think I knew what I really wanted to do when I went to college. I too went to the University of Florida. I studied event management there. And because my father worked at the Orange Bowl, every holiday, summer, I would always intern there. I think that's where I kind of fell in love with events and operations. And so once I graduated, I worked for UCF as well. That's where I met Ashley. And I worked in the athletic department in the foundation. So I did events for the foundation. I did that for a couple of years. And then I interned at Florida Citrus Sports for 3 or 4 months. Then I got a full-time job with the Orange Bowl doing team operations and events. And so I was there for 3 years and just obviously loved the event space, loved the bowl industry. And because I kind of grew up in it, it was kind of second nature to me that that's something that I was going to do. And then the opportunity came that there was an opening at Florida Citrus Sports. And because I had the relationships there still, they reached out to me to see if I wanted to join the team. So that's how I ended up back there.
So glad. Selfishly, as your friend, I'm glad that you are back in Orlando. I'll share a little bit of my journey. I actually graduated college when the market crashed. So I was a former student athlete. I knew I wanted to work in sports. And one of the most important things I did was take an internship at a news station because I thought I wanted to be a broadcaster. But you have to, in order to do like the highlights, you have to be at the office at like 5 a.m. And in Buffalo, where I'm from, that meant like starting your car 30 minutes in advance, shoveling the snow to get there. And I realized quickly, I don't want to be a news anchor. I don't want to be a broadcaster, which was really important. So the market actually kind of crashed in 2008, 2009 when I was graduating college, and I decided to pursue my master's degree at UCF, super far from where I'm from, but it was one of the top programs in the country, and I was excited to further my education and build my network. I spent about 10 years after grad school in the NBA. I worked for Madison Square Garden for several years, which is the New York Knicks, the New York Rangers, and the New York Liberty. And then was lucky enough to work alongside Gene at the Orlando Magic for several years in a variety of roles. One of the beauties of my roles and time at the Magic was that I had a lot of different learning opportunities. I worked in corporate partnerships, I worked in premium activation, I worked in ticket services. I joked that I managed every level of the building. So I had an understanding of what it looked like to be at the top of the building, at the last seat in the building, to like in the private clubs at the bottom and everything in between. So after that, I was able to come back to UCF and join the same master's program that I went to school with. And my real goal and focus was the opportunity to combine what I loved about sports and the entertainment and the revenue generation, but not have to work every single event. The other really beautiful part is that I loved coaching and mentoring, and I get to do that with young professionals entering the sports industry. And I have a unique perspective in that I've hired a ton of people, so I know what practitioners is what apparently we call it in the education world. I know what people who are working in the sports field are looking for, so I can help better prepare those students to enter into the sports industry. So that's what I'm doing currently, and it's a ton of fun. And I'm really excited that I don't have to work Christmas Day or New Year's Day or Easter, all the holidays that you work when you work in sports. So I get to go and enjoy games now. It's like a unique perspective on my sports life. So I would love to even just jump in there, like talk a little bit about the grind that it is to work in sports. I think a lot of people think that it's really sexy, like, oh, I get to work in sports, and do you travel with the team, and do you get to go to cool events? And hey, Gene, are you friends with Vooch? Like, talk a little bit about your day-to-day and how it impacts your life outside of sports and work.
Sure. So there is no one day that is ever the same or replicated. And I'm sure that every sports professional or anybody that's been involved in sports can agree to that. When you're on the front end of the season, the grind automatically starts prior to the season even starting, preparing for each and every game, each and every activation and initiative, planning out months in advance just to make sure everything aligns once those things occur. Several long nights and hours, whether it be game days, events out in the community, non-game days. So you just have to be prepared to, work those long hours, and along the way, building solid relationships. That is something that's been key for me, especially in my current role, both internally and externally. I'll harp on that quite a bit during this conversation, I'm sure, as those relationships are crucial when you're trying to get things done, when you're trying to find out what's going on in the community, what issues need to be addressed, and how, from an organizational standpoint, you can utilize the resources that you have available to address some of those needs in the form of programs, in the form of initiatives, or just making sure that your organization is in tune as to what's going on and if there's an opportunity to provide assistance. So from a day-to-day standpoint, those things vary on each and every day, but it's something that gets me up and it gets me going each and every day, because I know that you can always expect something different.
Carlyn, anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, obviously for bowl games, it's a little different. And I think even just like early in my career working at the Orange Bowl, I had a lot of friends that were like, I mean, your games are in December and January. Like, what do you do all year? And it's like, I mean, Yes, I get it. Our games are at the end of the year, but there's so much that goes into planning, a football game in itself, but there's so many events that we plan within that month, and logistics and operations and everything, and budgeting. And so there's so much, and I always laughed, obviously, and then had to explain everything that I'm doing. But then, with Florida Social Sports, because we're a member-based organization, we have so many events that we try to put on throughout the year. So that keeps us busy with whether it's a fundraiser or it's just engaging our members so that they stay and they want to continue to be a part of our organization. So, kind of like Jean said, like every day is different, but for the most part, we're just trying to plan for our members and the things that we know that they'll want to continue to come to every year.
Yeah, I think the lesson is that there's no real off season, right? I know everyone is always like, oh, your summers are so incredible. And I'm like, are they? And they are, and it's all worth it. But like, I think it's important to know that when the season's off, you're planning for the season. Like when the season starts, you're kind of in a rotation and a move on. Or if it's, December and January, you're kind of in a rotation of what it looks like to run your sport. So both of you have different roles and responsibilities, but both of you are hiring managers. So in addition to what's on a regular job description, I want you to be able to plan events, or I want you to be able to manage a budget, or whatever that is. What are you looking for when you're hiring entry level or young sports business professionals? What are you looking for? What qualities should they have?
Yeah, I would definitely say what their prior involvement looks like aside from their course load. How active are they? What resources, what can they bring to the table aside from their curriculum that can make them successful in those roles? I think another a key trait for me is being willing to and able to work on a team in a team setting. Athletes, automatically have some of those traits and skill sets, but that's not to say that those are the best candidates. But I would definitely say somebody that's willing to be, willing to work in a team setting, and shows that they have been done above and beyond what the job description shows is something that I look for.
Yeah, teamwork is definitely an important thing. I joke with my students that they're like, oh, I don't want to work with so-and-so in a group, and I only want to pick my group. And I'm like, do you think you're going to get to pick your boss? You think you're going to get to pick who your team
Exactly.
Right.
So those are really transferable skills. Like those projects really help to prepare you for work. Carlyn, what about you? It's a little bit of a different role. So there's probably some unique skill sets coming with planning events and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree a lot with Jean. That's a lot of the stuff that I look for. And especially what you've been involved in and like volunteering. And a lot of times I tell people it doesn't even have to be like a job, right? Let's say but for me, if I see that you were planning an event for your sorority or for the animal shelter or something like that, like those things stick out to me too, because then when I'm interviewing you, I can ask you about those experiences and the things that you did and equate it to the job description that I'm asking you to do. For me, for events, I always, time management and just like how you handle stress. Events is very stressful, and especially in the bowl industry, there's a lot happening in 2 weeks. Most of the time during bowl week, we have maybe 2 to 3 events on one day. And it's back to back to back. And you're not sleeping a lot because you have to get up really early. Yeah. So, how you handle those situations to me really is something that obviously it's hard to gauge. People can tell you that they're great under pressure. But I think by me asking questions, by seeing the things that you have done, I can kind of gauge that. So yeah, those are. Mm-hmm.
So it looks like we maybe have one student question in our middle of our fireside chat here. It says, how can students get involved while still pursuing their degree? So we're in a unique time, and we can maybe talk a little bit COVID, but prior to COVID, let's talk a little bit. Both of you have advanced degrees. You were both working while you were pursuing your degrees. I will be happy to chime in here as well. But Carlyn, like, what can students be doing to be better prepared while they're pursuing their degree?
I would say if you can get an internship with the school or the university or really anywhere, I think that will help you. I also think that early on, because I interned a lot when I was younger, I learned a lot of just basic office skills that I think that if you aren't put in that situation, I mean, as little as making, two-sided copies or like labels or things so simple, but I have come across interns that don't know how to do those things. So I think that if you start early, and even if it's maybe something that's not in sports, but it gets you that experience of like being in an office culture, to me, that helps. And then just volunteering too. I know that we all want to get paid for our internships, but sometimes that opportunity is not there. So volunteer your time. We have a great volunteer program, and we've hired some interns who have volunteered because they have helped us year after year, and we know that we can trust them and rely on them, and they understand the company. So I say, even if you can't get paid, like, intern.
That's great. Jean, what about you?
Carlyn, I 100% agree. I tell anybody that is pursuing a career in sports, you must work while you wait. You have to work while you wait. So if you have any idea of the specific department that you want to get involved in, it doesn't have to be in sports. If you pursue a career as a cashier or in the hotel industry, you're working on interactions with clients. So you're building a certain skill set that is applicable to, say, if working in ticket sales or working in a service department with a sports organization. So if you can align some of the responsibilities of a job that you want to pursue and apply that in another industry, those skill sets are basically the same, and they are very transferable. So in any opportunity that you do have to volunteer, to pursue internships, part-time jobs, whatever the case may be, just work while you wait and show that you are making those strides and progressions to, achieve the goals and achieve the jobs that you are ultimately pursuing.
Yeah. And I'll jump in here, just being in the education space now and transitioning from the professional sports space. I think what Jean and Carlyn are both saying are super important. I mentioned earlier that I learned what I did not want to do by getting an internship. So as much as you're like, oh, I need to gain experience, you might decide like, God, I hate broadcasting. I actually don't like being in front of the camera. Or the idea of social responsibility sounds really fun, but like all these community relations events are a lot, and it's a lot of weekends and whatever the case may be. So definitely get involved. And I think part of the question was also like the specifics of a master's degree. So Jean, I'll ask you to jump in here, but for me, a master's degree, it expands what you learn as a general degree in undergrad. So I was exposed to all of the different areas in which you can work in sports through getting my master's degree. When I was 22 and I thought I knew everything, it was, if you worked in sports, you either sold tickets or you were the general manager. Like, I didn't really have an understanding of what working in sports looked like. Your master's degree really helps to expand upon all of the other areas. So there's agency work. Like, you can work for an agency and represent a brand. You can work for a brand directly. Like, if you work for Pepsi, you're going to work every Super Bowl. I don't think people realize that. The other big value of your master's degree is that it expands your network. So your professors, your industry leaders who are coming in and teaching your courses. I know at UCF, we have people from the Magic, people from Jordan brand coming in teaching our classes, and it expands your network. And because you work on what we call industry projects, you get exposed to what's happening in the sports world. You're able to speak the language. You're able to understand the business challenges these companies are facing. When I was getting my master's, I did a Carlyn, you're comfortable and know this well, but I did a membership platform project for the Minnesota Vikings. So we had to analyze all of the data, understand what their membership base looked like, and create a membership platform. We flew there, we presented to them. It was like my first big consulting job, even though it was a class project. I got hired in membership for the New York Knicks because I had that project on my resume. So the beauty of a master's degree helps to really expose you to all of the other ways that you can work in sports. You're good with numbers. Guess what? Analytics is the biggest thing in sports that you could ever have right now. Nobody's making any decisions in events, in community relations, in ticket pricing without the analytics team. So sometimes we're annoyed with the analytics team. Jean, I know you can speak to that. Maybe we just want to like do a feel-good event, but we decisions based on analyzing the data. Like, okay, do our members actually like yoga on the field? Yeah, because we can see that we're increasing our numbers every time. But it's our analytics team who teaches you that. And so your master's degree takes a general idea of what working in sports looks like and expands upon it greatly and really hones in on the skills that you can gain. I don't know, Gene, if you want to share, I know you have your master's from Florida. I'm not going to get you to go in Gators, but share a little bit about how your master's degree sort of shaped and helped you to get to where you are now.
Sure. To your point, it definitely expanded my network, but one of the strides that I did take was being involved in our sport management club. And then we had the ability to go to Orlando Magic games and learn the ins and outs of, there are different opportunities within the sports world that I wasn't privy to prior to those visits. So I think it definitely helps. It definitely allows you to kind of finite which path that you want to take when you're pursuing your professional career. And I think from a hiring standpoint, it shows that you're going above and beyond those that may not have pursued those opportunities to expand their skill set and their knowledge base. So I think that is a definite resource to have and something that will elevate you when you are pursuing your job. So kudos to all of those students that are pursuing their graduate degrees in sport management and further education.
And I think the other thing that I would add before we move on to the next question is that those peers that you don't want to do group projects with inevitably become your peers in the sports industry. So it's really important that your network is obviously like your professors and sports leaders, but your network is also the people sitting to the left and the right of you. Carlyn and Jean and I were all 23 once and like meeting and, hey, how are you? And we've maintained our relationship for probably the past decade or so. And so it's important to understand that you build relationships with those classmates as well, because inevitably you're going to see them across the table at some point. You're going to be like, hey, how are you? And that network is really important too. So I would also add that some of my very best friends and coworkers and across the sports industry were classmates of mine. Even if they graduated a year before me or a year after me, I've inevitably worked with somebody from the DeVos Sport Business Management program throughout my career every year. So really important to maintain relationships. And maybe we talk about the value of networking in a little bit, but it's 2020. We have experienced two massive shifts in the sports industry. So let's start with COVID. How has COVID impacted your day-to-day? How has it changed overall your view of the sports industry? Carlyn, I'm gonna start with you and switch it up.
Well, being an event person, to be honest, it was really hard in the beginning when like all of our events started getting canceled. We had in March, one of our like bigger events that we put on that's like one of my favorite. And I think that was just like crushing because, you work so hard and it's a fundraising event. So we work really hard getting sponsors and donors and whatnot. And to have to postpone, but then, realistically cancel. I think for the first like month, I was kind of like in denial that we weren't going to be able to put on events anymore.
Yeah.
And then I think reality sat in and like, we had to say, okay, how are we going to pivot? And, obviously because a lot of the events that we plan are for our members, and we have a great team that we kind of sat down and thought, well, what can we do? And obviously everyone in the events industry and sports is moving to, these virtual platforms and these virtual events. And so I think that in the beginning, there was such a heavy, so we did a lot of virtual, whether it was a happy hour or we did a NFL watch party with our members and, virtually watching it, and a virtual cooking, like not show, but, cooking night. So we had to get creative in a way that, we've never been asked to be creative in that space. And then you also have to think about everyone's on Zoom, everyone's doing these virtual things. So at what point do people get tired of looking at their computer all day long? Yeah. So I think that's the hard part in this right now is you still want to create content and things for your members and, people, but you don't want to burn them out. So I think that's kind of been hard in the beginning of how do we still keep them engaged, you know, but not burn them out, but still keep them wanting to come back, and, you know, understanding that this year is unique. And, you know, obviously football has started and we're, you know, moving forward to bowl games, but, you know, it's going to look different. You know, it's the capacity is, I mean, everybody's been watching and we don't know, you know, and so everyone's hoping for the best, but then, you know, we got to look for next year and be like, we want all of our members to come back. So next year, when we're back to full capacity, then everyone's happy and in the stands. So it's been different and challenging, and I'm sure everyone has seen that.
Yeah, I think one of the main skills that I'm hammering home to our students now is adaptability. The ability to say, okay, how do we evolve, pivot, move in a different direction, and be creative to make goods for corporate partnerships, make goods for members, and all of those things. And Jean, I would love to get your unique perspective, because you work in the community, and so much of the community is hands-on. So much of it, so many non-for-profits are really hurting. If we think the sports industry is hurting with all their billions and millions of dollars, I mean, you work in partnership with that nonprofit sector. Talk to us a little bit about how COVID has impacted your landscape within the sports industry.
It's drastically changed. Just from, you know, from a day-to-day standpoint, being out in the community just about every day, to, you know, having to gauge totally differently, and it's not as personable. So to Carlyn's point, you have to find ways to be innovative, to connect, and to make sure you're still in tune with what's going on. You know, to be quite frank, we've been working home since March. So we've been working home remotely for about 7 months now. So, you know, those engagements change, but I think, you know, you have to meet people where they're at right now. And that's the most important thing. So making sure that you're still able to sustain those relationships, understand how, you know, whether it's nonprofits or community partners, understand how your organization can be an aid to some of the shortcomings and downfalls that those organizations are enduring right now, and more so the community than nonprofits specifically, because you have to think of community needs right now. Just the impact on youth and underserved families that, you know, don't have the immediate access to food, that don't have the immediate access to, you know, healthcare, and amongst many other things. So how can we utilize our resources to, you know, partner with those that have those direct impacts, and making sure that, you know, we have their interests in mind to help them out in their, you know, dire time of need.
Yeah. And I think another part of the question, it was specifically about the recovery process, and specific to live gates and partnerships, which I think might squarely fall on my shoulders to answer to the best of my ability. Ticketing standpoint, I think I probably have the most experience among the three of us when it comes to corporate partners and ticketing. And for me, I think this is what I would call the burden of leadership. This is where you're making tough decisions about what doing possibly the right thing is, which is maybe giving refunds to season ticket holders, which is maybe cutting your losses, and understanding that you might have to lay people off, or you might have to furlough people, which I know is a super scary thing, but that's why I call it the burden of leadership. I think there's a lot of companies who are evaluating what that looks like, and the relief efforts mean that it's going to look different, that you're going to be digging out of a hole. So you're going to have to, and this is where that analytics teams comes in. I know right now that the NBA in particular is doing a ton of projections on what it will look like for us to play without fans, what it will look like for us to play with 25% capacity, what it will look, ticket price is going to look like, what are people willing to pay. I can guarantee there's surveys going out about how comfortable people feel. Would you prefer to wear a mask or not wear a mask? And there's a lot of just understanding of what that will look like. I think you've seen over the last 7 or 8 months that there's a lot of companies doing what are called make goods, or just filling in what it looks like. So if you were sponsoring the games, you're maybe now sponsoring Zoom events. If you were, we were trying to get you out there, you maybe now have radio spots or things like that. So they're really working hard to create events that allow the sponsors to have their name and image out there, as well as reevaluating completely what their partnership might look like. I worked, and Jean, I think we were together during the NBA lockout. Now listen, there's no comparison to COVID and the NBA lockout. There's no comparison. My students keep asking me, Ms. Ashley, what's I don't know. I literally have no idea. I can tell you from a lockout perspective, what we did was provide credits and opportunities to, when the season came back, to use those things that were those assets in our corporate partnership deals or our ticket deals at the back end of the upcoming season. So we were locked out, I think, until like right around Thanksgiving, Gene, if you remember. So we missed about 6 weeks of the season. So that meant 6 weeks of sponsors not having it, timeout, partnerships and activations. It meant season ticket holders not having games. So we gave food and beverage credit. So we didn't lose any ticket revenue. We gave them food and beverage revenue, which from a sports perspective means you're funneling your money back into the arena. So finding out those unique ways. So, okay, maybe you didn't spend money on tickets because you weren't in the building, but how do we give people incentive to continue to spend and continue to pump revenue into, the sports industry, into the arena? So I think there's a lot of people who are probably smarter than me who are looking to figure out what it looks like to make up some of those revenues, but also understanding that some of that revenue cannot be made up. If anybody was watching the NBA bubble, you could see that they were trying to create partnership makeups for home teams, even though they were playing on the same court every night. They were ripping up those logos and throwing down new logos. Disney suddenly was everybody's partner, even though they're technically really specifically a Magic jersey patch partner. But you could see every night the screens were flipped, the logos on the floor, the peel-offs were coming up. So just trying to find unique ways. And I don't think anybody has a concrete, that's the answer, that's what we should be doing. Everyone's really just trying to evolve and figure out what that looks like. So I hope that answers your question. Doesn't shoot us back another question in the Q&A, and we're happy to keep talking about it. I think the other big thing, and Jean, this question is directed to you, but Carlyn would also love to hear your feedback, is we've had, I would consider a racial reckoning with the murder of George Floyd. I think it really woke up our country, and we would be remiss to not discuss how it's impacted sports, specifically in the NBA, but really across all sports platforms. We've seen collegiate sports and college athletes stand up and demand more. We've seen, obviously, professional sports in the NBA. We've seen football players in the NFL, even all the way to hockey, which I think most people don't really associate with a lot of diversity. We've seen a lot of protests. So Jean, how has that part of this being home with COVID, but also this racial reckoning happening in our country, impacted sports or changed your view on sports?
I would say for me personally, it has inspired me to see so many leagues, so many teams and players really come together. When from an organizational standpoint, that starts with your leadership, understanding that there is a social unrest that needs to be addressed, and backing that and supporting that. So finding ways that you can support your players, support your team, utilize your resources to share that messaging that we stand against social injustice, allying yourself with those that are, working on the ground to fight against social injustice, and really taking a step back to educate ourselves on where did this start? How did we get to this specific point? And what are things that we can do to combat what's going on systematically within this fight against social injustice? What can we do to really hear our players and understanding, they're speaking up about, things that they don't agree with. How can we fill that void and utilize our platform, utilize our media, our social media, utilize websites, utilize messaging to our fan base to say, hey, this is where we stand, and to educate and try to figure out a way in how we can move forward to address some of these issues that we're facing right now. I've been very inspired and from our organization that we've started a social justice task force to really look at, from a business perspective and looking internally. Right now, we're in the process of hiring a chief executive officer of diversity, inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So taking that internal look to see what we can do to make strides in the right direction to make our organization more diverse. We're collaborating with community partners to see, how we can provide support to those that are fighting on the ground to make those changes, as well as from a business standpoint. How can we expand our, supplier diversity and provide opportunities for those that are underrepresented in the business space? So, in all honesty, I've been inspired to see what's been going on here locally within our organization, across the NBA and what they've been doing, and across the different leagues, to acknowledge, what's going on and how we can unify and utilize our platforms and our resources to make ultimate change as we move forward.
Yeah, Jean, that's so good. And I'll just add, one of my greatest joys, and I've had a lot of career projects and things that I've been really proud of. One of my greatest joys is that at UCF Sports Business Management Program, we do more than just create business leaders. We create socially conscious, social justice warriors. And that's the unique thing that separates our program from every other program. You're going to get your master's and you're going to learn analytics and statistics and marketing and all those things. But I think what really is unique about our students and what I'm really proud of is that we have the ability to say, you're going to be trained in what it looks like to work in an equitable workforce and to be a voice for change when you go to the workforce, whether you're white, Black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. I'm really proud of the diversity of our program and that we teach that as a core value of who we are, because I think more than ever, you're going to need to know more than what it looks like to run events, more than what it looks like to understand social responsibility or sell tickets. You're going to have to understand and be conscious and aware and a warrior for what's right and what's just in our country. And I'm really proud of our students who have really dug in this and, you know, have had tough conversations with each other to say, how are we going to be better? How are we going to go in and impact the sports industry as more than just marketers, as more than just event planners? So Jean, I love that answer. I think it's great. I'm proud to be an alum of the Orlando Magic and partnership with the DeVos program here at UCF. So thank you for sharing that. Carlyn, we have a unique question for you. As we go back to having events, we had a great question about how are we going about keeping our patrons and members safe? So what protocols and procedures are you putting in place as we go back to in-person events? How does that change your budget? How does that change your planning process as we kind of weigh the balance of we are all wanting to be together, but also wanting to be safe?
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely changes a lot. We have to think a little bit more about, and I'll use some of our like smaller events because obviously those are kind of in front of us first. You know, obviously temperature checking and everyone wearing their mask, but also signage, you know, so we have to budget more for signage. You know, we just social distance, just everything that, you know, we've been saying for the past 7 months. Now you have to reiterate that when you have people coming in your building or attending your events. We started yoga again on the field, and, you know, we had to make, you know, more signs for that. We never really had a ton of signage for yoga, but now, you know, we have to be cautious with, you know, all of our staff having masks and face shields and temperature checking and hand sanitizing stations. So that's another cost that, you know, you might have seen maybe 2 or 3 kind of scattered randomly, but now you're going to have one at every, you know, pretty much almost every point of entry and throughout wherever you're having your event. So I definitely think, you know, the COVID budget goes up because you're adding additional expenses for the things that you have to purchase. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely different. You really have to think about, not only are you thinking logistically about your event, but you also now add a whole nother layer of, you know, how do you keep people from crowding in the bathrooms and just like things that you probably will have never thought of because it's just normal for people to just kind of walk around and do whatever they want. But you kind of have to have another layer of kind of security and thought process when you're planning these events.
Yeah, Carlyn, speaking of adding layers, and you're probably going to kill me for this, but I'm going to go there because we're friends and I know you. Your role expanded a little bit, and you added some of the social responsibility with Lift Orlando through your roles at Florida Citrus Sports. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got involved and how you kind of changed and pivoted towards being more involved with Lift Orlando as your job was kind of like different because you weren't having in-person events during this COVID season, and talk about how you kind of really got involved in social responsibility when the world kind of flipped upside down?
Yeah, I think that obviously, not that I had a lot of downtime, but, you know, I'm not planning as many events as I normally am. So I think that we've always been partners in Lift Orlando and the community of West Lakes. And I think that for me, for the past 4 years, I've kind of, you know, have had a glimpse of like working with West Lakes, and they volunteer with us, and I've made relationships with a lot of the the neighbors, but I think for me, I wanted to be more involved. I felt like I could do more. And so I think that's kind of why, and especially with George Floyd and just kind of everything that was happening in the world, I think that I felt that I wanted to connect our staff a little bit more with the great things that we were doing in Lift Orlando. I think a lot of times, you know, you can do great things with an organization, but if all of your staff and all of the people that work for that organization aren't truly tapped in, then it's kind of just, it's a miss, right? And so I think that that kind of sat heavy on my heart, and I wanted to figure out how I could bridge that gap. And so, you know, obviously there's a lot of moving parts, and it's, you know, kind of slow now because COVID and getting together with people, but I've sat on a lot of phone calls and have kind of just been able to get more involved and understand really what's going on in the neighborhood and the community, which is great because it's just a lot of things that if you're not in it, you don't know. And so just, you know, obviously with the school systems, just how, you know, Jones and all of the schools in that 32805 area, you know, the reading level is below average, you know, but I would have never known that because I'm not in that space, right? And so now I'm privy to all of this information, and you know, we've done some great things over the summer of the Early Learning Center. They needed books for all of the kids, and we for our members had all of our members donate books for them, and I can't remember how many books we ended up getting, but you know, just little things like that I feel like help, and you don't realize that, you know, a $5 book can make a difference to a child who maybe can't afford a book, or his family can't afford to read to them every day. So there's just little things like that that I'm learning, and that's great. And I appreciate, you know, my leadership team of allowing me to pivot into that space, and I'm looking forward to growing that piece.
That's great. I wanna stay on social responsibility a little bit. Jean, you have a specific question about Route 7 and how it impacts Orlando. Somebody on this in this group Q&A knows you personally, I think, and has a little bit more understanding. So can you talk to us a little bit about Route 7 and how it impacts Orlando?
Sure. So it is a nonprofit organization that I'm a part of. It's a network of gentlemen driven to promote growth amongst the community and each other. So primarily, we are an accountability group for young professional males, but also we turn that accountability to ourselves, to youth. So we also mentor at the Levy Hughes Boys and Girls Club. And we recently started a mentoring program that is called Well Said, so that teaches the importance of public speaking and teaches the nuances of how to public speak and really to portray your thoughts to the grand scales, and how you actually you know, portray your thoughts to people that you're speaking to in that realm. So not to harp too much on Route 7 right now, but it does hold a special place in my heart. And just love the platform that we are able to impact youth, impact each other, and really grow our network of gentlemen, really trying to produce good into our community and Central Florida as a whole.
Great. We're going to pivot a little bit and talk about advice and those entering into the workspace. One question that we got in the Q&A was, does understanding the game help you to enter into the sports industry? And like, so it was a question about gameplay. So like, do you, Carlyn, are you first down and you know all the things? Jean, I know you know everything about basketball. And I mean, I can start with answering that like, I think student athletes have a unique perspective, or like that competitive ability. I don't care what level you played. Being a student athlete, I think, gives you, Jean, to your point earlier, Carlyn, you cheered competitively, which is a whole other challenge I could never get into. I was a soccer player in college, but I think it gives you teamwork and your ability I think for me specifically, being on a team, it shows that you have a desire to improve constantly. So understanding gameplay is less important. Listen, I'm 5'3". I don't have anything to add to the Orlando Magic. I used to travel with the team, and the guys used to always say, like, you're so little. And I would respond with like, you think you're a normal size. Like you think that like people see you and think, oh, that's a normal size person. Like I can walk into Publix and be fine. I understand basketball. I love basketball. I understand all the rules. Carlyn, I know you love football. We watch football together. Jean, you know, but I don't know. You guys can jump in here. I don't think understanding the game necessarily is super important. We can teach you if you don't understand. I played soccer. Nobody knows what offsides is, but you don't need that to work for Orlando City Soccer.
No.
You guys agree? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think especially for me, because I'm in events, I think it's a plus that I love football and I grew up watching football and I like sports. But at the end of the day, I'm an event planner. And so for me, if I'm hiring somebody, I don't care if you like football, watch football, understand football, as long as you understand how to plan an event and you're good at your job, then if later on down the road you end up loving football, great. But to do what I do, you don't have to understand. I don't think you have to understand the game. I know the girl that works for me right now, she doesn't watch sports. I mean, she likes it, but she's amazing at her job. And
Yeah.
I would rather her than somebody who is a fan and just wants to be in sports just to be in sports. And I think that sometimes that is the problem, is that there are people that just want to be in sports to be in sports because they love it so much, but they don't understand that, yes, it's great. It's fun. There are moments where it's amazing, but I could tell you, I could probably count on one hand how many games I've actually watched during a bowl. Like, especially when I worked at the Orange Bowl, the only time I went on the field was to help roll a stage out or something like that. So
Right.
if you want to watch a football game, like this is not where it's at. Like my job is not where it's at, because you're not going to have time to sit there and watch the game. You know, it's just,
Yeah. Yeah, I think there has to be a balance with, like, it's great if you love sports, but I will tell you that I would get to the end of a game and be like, everyone, who won? Oh, I have no idea. I didn't see 1 second of that game. I have no idea who won the game. And I will also add that you never watch a sports event the same after you work in sports. I cannot go to a stadium without counting the minutes it takes me to park, counting the minutes it takes me to get in, where the food stations are, what the customer service was like. I have to watch every corporate partnership activation to understand how they're using it and what. I can tell you all of the sponsors from the bubble. I watched the games, but I also watched all of the outside stuff that was happening. So it's not imperative or even that important that you know or understand whatever specific sport you're working for. Yes, maybe have a working knowledge, but certainly not the be all to end all. So maybe being too much of a fan can be an issue. And that kind of leads us to one of our other questions what are some mistakes? You both are in hiring positions. What are some mistakes that candidates have made as they've been applying for positions that we can help these young professionals avoid when it comes to entering the sports industry?
I'll go ahead and take that one to begin with. I wouldn't say a mistake, but I would say that candidates can be over aggressive. If you're reaching out to multiple people within an organization, if you're trying to pursue one job, I think you have to be very strategic in regards to building relationships, and not building transactional relationships, but actual genuine relationships when you're pursuing a job within a particular organization. Because, sports it's a small knit community. Organizations are even smaller. So if you're pursuing something, people are going to talk if you're overly aggressive in regards to, maybe it's sending, multiple emails or, cover letters, resumes, month after month, things of that nature. I've seen that happen. So if if you're too assertive, that can be a disadvantage at times. So I would say, if you're trying to make an impact and get to know a little bit more about the organization and to build relationships, do so in a genuine fashion and don't make it so transactional.
That's great advice. Carlyn, advice?
I would say not doing your research on the organization. I think that that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen is, asking, what do you know about Florida Citrus Sports? And, it's just kind of like a deer in headlights. So to me, it's kind of, and I don't need you to tell us our mission statement and all, but
Yeah.
at least, say, hey, I know that you put on the 2 bowl games, even if you get the names wrong, at least you understand that we put on bowl games. So I think that when people come in and don't say anything or say, I don't know, then that's, to me, it obviously is a red flag, but I would say just, do your research. And even if it's a few bullet points about the organization, like at least know that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think the other thing that I would say is not really wanting a job, but wanting to work in sports. So I get a lot of people, especially when I work for the Magic, who are like, I want to work for you. And I'm like, I don't think you do. Like, you want to work 150 events a night, or do you just want to work for the Magic, right? Like, and I know, again, that sounds super sexy, but like, to both of y'all's points, like, you don't really get to spend a lot of time being a fan when you're at work. One piece of advice that I got when I was in graduate school is like, you can be a fan or you can work. It's really hard to do both. No, I rooted for the Magic. I always rooted for my paycheck every game. But you don't really get to just go and enjoy games. Like I literally, like, I only go to games that somebody else is working. And even then, like, if I get to go to a bowl game because Carlyn says, oh, do you want to come to the game? I'm like, oh my God. Like, I'm so excited because like, I don't typically get to experience that. So that would be one piece of advice. And Carlyn, we have one more question in the group, and then I'll bring us to maybe a last question, and specifically to you, but Gina, I want you to be thinking about it as well. Is leading up to event, is the week so stressful that like it's hard for you to enjoy the event? Or once you get to an event, do you have this moment of like, I did it, like I killed it, like I'm really proud of this event? And Gina, I'm sure there's a project or something, I'm marinating on it as well, that you get to like, oh my God, I was freaking out, I didn't think the flowers were gonna come in and all this, and you get to it and you're like, oh my God, this is bomb, like I killed it.
I have several. Oh, go ahead, Carlyn. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have several of them, but I have one top of mind. Go ahead, Carlyn.
I will say that I handle stress very well and very calmly. And I kind of actually, I think I thrive better in the chaos. That's how I knew that I was, I was made for the event world. So I actually love it. Like, I love the constant like, we have 25 things on our list, like, and our event is in 2 days. Like, what do we got to do? What are we checking off? So yes, it is stressful. But I think what makes it less stressful is the things that you do prior to. So I have always been a person that if we have 5 months in the summer where we're not slammed, or however many months we're not slammed with events, and we can knock out stuff that will ease the stuff in November, December, and January, why don't we do that? And so the more you're prepared on the front half, then the less, you can worry about the things that are last minute, the AV going out, or things that like are out of your control. But the things that you can control, have them under control. And I think that's where in events a lot of people slip up, is that they're trying to catch up, because they waited. And now, especially like for us, there's a lot of things that we have to wait until we hear the teams announced. The teams are announced and then they come 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. So it's like, you got to do signage. You have to do all of these things to put the team names on them. So have all of those things in place so that all you have to do is say, hey, so-and-so, it's Alabama and this person. There we go. So I think that—
I believe you said Alabama with all this crazy, all this Florida love, but keep going.
Well, that was the first thing that came to mind because they were there last year. So, but I've always, and I tell my interns that, I tell people that work for me, I said, and everybody who has worked for me knows that we need to plan ahead. And I do not like doing things last minute. And so again, COVID has really like stressed me because there's a lot, we're in a holding pattern for a lot of things. And then all of a sudden we can pull the trigger on something or do, it's a virtual thing. And, a lot of things are like 2 weeks out. And I'm like, I like things, 2 months, 3 months ahead of time. So it's definitely pushed a different, side of my brain, but yeah.
I love it. Jean, I feel like you had one that was like right there for you. Share it with us.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, similar to Carlyn, I definitely feel that I work well under stress, and I think the student athlete in me, or the athlete in me more so, strives for those type of events. Like, you are in preparation mode until events start. So to be as proactive as possible, to get so many moving pieces together, it's all about your planning and attention to detail at that point in time. The thing that really just came top of mind were the several activations where we had to renovate and refurbish probably 10 or so basketball courts across Central Florida, and the grand opening of those things, of those events, and making sure, you know, we were adhering to the partners' need, we're adhering to the community's need, and making sure that you have an event that's worthwhile, that's going to be talked about well after you know, that event has been executed. But you know, with that chaos, that nervousness that comes up to that peak of the event starting, there's no other thrill like it. And especially when you put months and months in, you have a team working towards the same goal. You know, when it's all said and done, I mean, that's your pinnacle. But the thing about that pinnacle is you have to do that maybe 2 weeks later. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you get to thrive in that win at the time that it's occurring, but you have, it's on to the next, it's on to the next, because we're not talking about what happened now. We're talking about what's going on, you know, a couple of weeks from now, or possibly the next day if there's a game the next day. And that's oftentimes what happens in our roles, as we host a lot of these community events or activations out in the community. And then the following day, we have to prep for a game and make sure all these other logistics are intact and in place. So to Carlyn's point, you know, being proactive, making sure it may not be top of mind right in that second, in that moment, but you have to think about all these small things as far as, you know, contacting different people, getting supplies together, you know, drafting certain, you know, emails or scripts or what have you. So making sure you're as proactive as possible and making sure everybody's on the same page. But, you know, once those events are executed, there's no better feeling.
Yeah, we have a minute left, so I'll say quickly, All-Star Weekend was that for me, coming out of a lockout and then having to flip and plan All-Star in, I don't know, 8 weeks was, I remember crying on Christmas Day, thinking we got to launch it. It was a stressful thing, but Monday morning, I was like, oh my gosh, we killed it. Like, we pulled that off. So we have about 45 seconds left, rapid fire. Resources, apps, websites you use every day to keep you abreast of what's going on, connected and learning. Go.
Front Office Sports, that email I get every day, read that every day. Great resource just to be in the know in the sports world. And Microsoft Suites, Microsoft everything, Teams, OneNote, OneCloud. That is my go-to. It's on my laptop. It's on my phone. Information is always, you know, readily available. That's me.
Asana. I love Asana.
Asana is a good one. I would say for you young people, use Twitter to your advantage. There's so much news and information on Twitter that's outside of the junk and all the culture stuff. You to read the actual stories, Instagram, all those things. Players Tribune, Bleacher Report, they're putting a lot of junk and fun stuff out, but they're also putting a lot of stuff out that is important, talking about the CBAs for the NBA and the WNBA, all those things. Use that as more than just like, oh, that's cool, that's happening, because that gives you insight into what's happening in the sports industry. So that's my 2 cents. I see we will put these in the chat, Front Office Sports, Asana. I'll put those in the chat for you guys for sure. I think that we are at time. We want to thank you guys for being here and being a part. Please help me with maybe a clap or a high five for Jean Martin and Carlyn Tribble. And we also obviously want to thank Florida Citrus Sports for taking the time to put this panel together and allowing us to share our stories. We hope you guys learned a bunch, and we're open to being connected. I know I can say that for Jean and Carlyn. Shoot us a message on LinkedIn. We'd love to answer any further questions. So thank you guys. Yeah. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.